Hey folks, James here from Sweet Pea Machine Embroidery, and I'm back to show you how to make another magical Christmas design. For the November so-long, we are making this wonderful Christmas village hanger. The hanger is made up of 9 different blocks. It can be sewn in the 4x4, 5x5, 6x6 or 7x7 size hoops. In this video, I will show you the stitch out of the town hall block and the construction of the Christmas village hanger. We recommend you follow the photographed written instructions provided in conjunction with this video. If you haven't already, go join the November So-Long group on Facebook to receive a 30% discount on this design. The link will be in the description below. If you enjoy Sweet Pea's tutorial on the Christmas Village Hanger So-Long, please like and subscribe. Now let's get started. Begin by hooping up cutaway stabilizer in the hoop and load the design onto your machine. Then place batting 1 on top of the hoop and stitch down. Once stitched down, remove the hoop from your machine and trim the batting about 1 to 2 mm from the stitching, using your applique scissors. Next, place fabric A right side up on top of the hoop, covering the batting. Stitch down. When laying down fabric, we use the pink thing to keep it lying flat, so it doesn't bunch up under the needle. Remove the hoop from your machine and trim the fabric about 1 to 2 mm from the stitching, leaving the excess fabric in the seams. Embroider the quilting on the background. Repeat the applique process with the haul using fabric B. Trim. Embroider the detail along the top. Embroider the satin stitch along the left side of the haul. Embroider the decorative stitch along the haul. Repeat the applique process with the roof using fabric C. And trim. Embroider the detail and satin stitch on the roof. Then embroider the lace along the top of the roof. Embroider the snow along the top of the roof. Embroider the satin stitch along the front of the haul. Embroider the bit of roof near the top and then embroider the snow on top. Repeat the applique process with the door using fabric D. And trim. Embroider the satin stitch around the door, then embroider the door handles. Embroider the greenery above the door, then embroider the decorations. Repeat the applique process with the windows using pieces of fabric. Trim. Embroider the detail and satin stitch around the windows. Repeat the applique process with the clock using a piece of fabric. Trim. Embroider the satin stitch around the clock. Embroider the hands of the clock. Embroider the decorative stitch below the clock. Embroider the holly leaves, then embroider the berries. Embroider the steps. Embroider the tree trunk. Repeat the applique process with the tree using a piece of fabric and trim. Embroider the satin stitch around the tree. Repeat the applique process with the ground using fabric E. Trim, leaving the excess fabric in the seams. Embroider the satin stitch along the ground. You have now completed the stitch out of the town hall block. Remove your work from the hoop and trim the seams about 1/2 inch using a rotary cutter and ruler. Here you have the completed block. Hold aside and follow the instructions for the remaining blocks you want to make. Lay out your blocks on a flat surface and decide on your layout. Start off by joining the blocks in rows. Place the first 2 blocks right sides together. Pin along one edge, lining up the border stitching the best you can. Take your time with this process. Stitch the side seam on your sewing machine. Stitch just inside the border already stitched on the blocks, so the stitching will not be seen on the right side later. Open out the stitch seams and iron flat. Continue this until you have joined the remaining blocks in that row together. Continue this until you have each horizontal row of blocks joined. Next, join the horizontal rows to each other by placing the first 2 rows right sides together. Pin and stitch the seams on your sewing machine. Stitch just inside the border already stitched on the blocks, so the stitching will not be seen on the right side later. Open out the stitch seams and iron flat. Continue this until you have joined all the horizontal rows together. Adding the flat piping to your hanger is completely optional. Skip this section if you do not want to have flat piping added to your runner. To make the flat piping, first measure the length of the join blocks, allowing for an inch overlapping each end. Cut 2 strips of your piping fabric G this length. Note, the flat piping strips should not have any joins in them, as this will cause them to look uneven when finished. Press the strips of the flat fabric for the piping in half widthways, ensuring the raw edges are sitting exactly on top of each other. Lay a flat piping strip fabric G on top of one of the long side edges of the right side of the join blocks, with the folded edge pointing towards the center of the background fabric. Pin or quilt clip together and stitch into place with a 1/4 inch seam. Repeat for the opposite long side edge of your runner using the second fabric G strip. The edges of the flat piping will overlap the ends. Trim the excess fabric so the piping is in line with the ends of the runner. Repeat the pinning and stitching process for the 2 short ends using fabric H. Adding borders around your hanger is optional. Skip this section if you don't wish to have borders. We made our borders 8 cm or 3 inches wide. Measure one end of the hanger. Cut 2 strips of border fabric the length you just measured, fabric I. Then cut 2 pieces of batting to match. Next we are going to secure the batting to the border fabric. This can be done in 2 ways. The first option is to place the border fabric right side up on top of the batting and with a long basting stitch sew a 1/4 inch from the edge. Basting the long edges together will prevent them from moving. Use a bobbin thread that will stand out for this step. The second option is to lightly spray temporary adhesive to the batting and then lay your fabric right side up on the batting. Place the hanger on top of the border fabric with the attached batting right sides together. Pin together. Stitch together with a 1/2 inch seam. Pinning and stitching on the wrong side of the hanger means you can make sure you are stitching inside the borderline on the front of the hanger. This will ensure this line of stitching will not show on the front. If you use basting stitches on your borders, go ahead and remove them now. Trim back the batting from the seam allowance. Fold over and iron the side border down neatly. Top stitch the border for a neat flat finish. Repeat for the opposite border. If needed, trim the borders to make them even. Now measure one of the side edges without a border, including the new border width in your measurement. Place the hanger on top of the border fabric with the attached batting right sides together. Pin and stitch a 1/2 inch seam from the edge. If you use basting stitches on your borders, go ahead and remove them now. Trim back the batting from the seam allowance. Fold over and iron the side border down neatly. Top stitch the border for a neat flat finish. Repeat for the opposite border. If needed, trim the borders to make them even. If needed, trim the borders to make them even. Adding the loops for hanging. Take out fabric K for the loops. Fold the two long edges in about 1/2 inch, 1 centimeter, wrong sides together, and iron. Fold in half lengthways, wrong sides together, and iron again. Top stitch the two long edges. Make sure the bobbin is in the same color as your top thread. You can also add as many lines of stitching for more detail on the loop. Make sure the loops are even and trim them to the desired length. Fold each loop in half with the raw edges meeting up with each other and clip. Base stitch the ends closed using a 1/4 inch seam. Have your hanger facing right side up on top of your work surface. We decided to place the two loops along the top about 1/2 inch in from the side seams of the hanger. This will depend upon the type of hanger you are using. Please note that you can have the loops as long as you like and as many as you like. Stay stitch in place using a 1/4 inch seam. Adding the backing. Take our fabric L and place it right side up on top of your work surface. Then place the hanger you have just made wrong side up on top of the backing fabric, right sides together. Pin together around the perimeter of the hanger, making sure you leave about an 8-inch gap at the bottom of the hanger. Using a sewing machine, stitch around the hanger using a 1/2 inch seam. Remember to not stitch close the gap at the bottom. Trim the seams back to about 1/4 of an inch and trim the seam at the opening to 1/2 an inch. Clip the corners. Turn the hanger out through the opening you made in the bottom so that the right sides are out. We used our pink thing to help push out the corners. Give it a good press. Fold in the excess fabric at the opening and iron closed so it's flush with the edges of the hanger. Top stitch all of the edges around the hanger. This will leave your edges with a neat, flat finish. Stitch in the ditch the internal seams. This will further attach the backing to the front of your hanger. If you are using one, add your Sweet Pea wall hanger now. Congratulations everyone, you should now be looking at your amazing Christmas village hanger by Sweet Pea. Thanks for watching Sweet Pea's tutorial on the Christmas village hanger sew along. Good luck with your photo entries and have a very Merry Christmas. That's all from me and I'll see you next time.